Shanaka. 153 for 9. It's very painful, doesn't it, Vic?
Yeah, well...
Did you ever take one? Did you ever take one of the solar plexus?
Well, I expect I did, but not playing that shot, I didn't. Only because, I mean, if I was growing up now, I would have, you know, I would be, no doubt, trying to play the scoop shot and all the others, but those shots didn't exist.
No, it's just... There's a little bit of finesse there from Shanaka, attempted finesse anyways. That's when Shanaka's just going to get some water here and settle himself. It can be quite painful when the ball hits you there. And Sam Curran, not slow, can be quite quick. As the physio and the 12th man for Sri Lanka just run off the field. 3 balls to come in the Sam Curran over. As Shanaka just settling himself, taking a moment. Lots of little pigeons I've noticed here at Bristol on the ground, very, very casually just floating around. If you listen closely, you can sometimes hear them cooing by our effects mic. 153 for 9. In comes Sam Curran, full and pushed defensively into the covers by Shanaka. There is no run. Lots of encouragement, lots of noise from the England fielders. They just seem like they're having a wonderful time at the moment. Smiles and laughing, and we talked about the camaraderie earlier, but they just seem like they're really enjoying their cricket at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's all slotting into place in the field in particular. That, you know, they've taken wickets at will. The standard of the out cricket, the fielding has been excellent. Morgan's not allowing them to, you know, relax too much.
Curran in once again, this time big shot from Shanaka. He beats the extra cover fielder. Will it race away to the boundary? Yes, it will. 4 runs for Shanaka, looking to break the shackles. He finally gets a hold of one. 4 more runs to the Sri Lankan total. 157 for 9. And a little bit more to cheer about for the Sri Lankan fans in attendance here in Bristol.
Well, Shanaka is one of those who will go back with head held high and reputation maybe slightly enhanced, I think.
Yes, well...
this is a plucky innings down the order again, with the tail again. He's got 39.
Yep, he got 47 in the previous game as well. Can he maybe find his way to 50? There's a last ball, so all the field has come in. They know that Shanaka's looking for the single. He's tried to keep the strike away from Asitha Fernando. Only fielder back now. They've got a deep third and they've got a deep fine leg. But other than that, everybody's in the circle protecting that single. Can England keep Shanaka on strike with this delivery? As in comes Curran, he bowls a full ball, which is pushed to point. They run through for a quick single. There's an attempt at the keeper's end. The ball misses. They make it through for a single, so Shanaka will keep the strike for the 41st over. Sri Lanka 158 for 9. 40 overs gone. I sense a little cameo coming here for Shanaka. Vic, how important are these runs? Think about that. Tell us about that. And in a moment, you're going to be joined by the legendary Simon Mann.
At the moment, you don't feel they're good for morale purposes to run. 158 is a paltry total on what I think is essentially a blameless pitch. But you know, it's going to be. It was a good piece of cricket actually. In that it was a risky run, but at least the batsman at the other end knew what his job was. He was going to set off. There was no hesitation. Willey had to hit the stumps with only really one to aim at, and he didn't hit him.
That was a bit of a build-up, wasn't it?
For you, yeah, it must be perhaps an unprecedented one, I thought.
I think unprecedented and final. Here is Rashid, 158 for 9, and he's got the strike. He's on 40. Dasun Shanaka. So inside the last 10 overs now.
So Rashid can have an extra boundary fielder, and he's given in that extra boundary fielder.
He's been bowling to an extraordinary field to Shanaka. Here is Rashid bowling. It's forced away, or they decide not sure whether to run there or not. I think because they weren't sure whether it was going to be 1 or 2. So obviously they'd love to get up and down for 2, but
probably the best bet for him if he just hits it very gently towards mid-wicket, and you could get to there.
There's Billings though, he brought up a brilliant run out in that situation at Durham. They thought it was comfortable too. Here's Rashid, bowls to Shanaka. Shanaka powers that away into the offside, out towards deep extra cover. There's no run. He's got 3 men behind square on the offside, 3 behind square on the offside, and a short fine leg, and then boundary riders in front of the wicket, and a deep back of square leg. Previous over he had backwards square leg in as well, so 5 behind square. Here is Rashid to bowl to Shanaka. Shanaka plays that defensively into the offside. It goes rolling out towards deep extra cover. It's a bit like 9 wickets down in a test match. You don't often see it like this in a one-day international. Rashid dries the ball as it's lobbed in from the deep, because we have had some rain, but mercifully not as much as we were fearing today. 158 for 9 is the score in the 41st over. Rashid bowls to Shanaka. Shanaka bludgeons this in the air for 6. Way back. That'd have been 6 when the boundaries were long here at Bristol. It was off the back foot and slammed over long on, well back into the crowd in front of the pavilion. 164 for 9, and Shanaka goes to 46.
Well, it's a powerful shot, that, because, I mean, he's pulling the ball essentially, but he sort of pulled it just over mid-on. Just a bit short from Rashid, and he spied where the shortest boundary was, just as a precaution, which is straight down the ground. Now I guess the ball has to be retrieved and then...
Yeah, it does, yeah.
And has to be sort of cleaned up again.
Yeah. So Asitha Fernando's only faced 4 balls so far. Shanaka is 46 not out from 63 balls.
They're going to get 183, aren't they?
That says it wasn't far off as a prediction has come not to pass, but...
What? Who said that? Who said it was going to be 183?
Predict Viz.
Oh, I see. Right.
And that was when they were about 98 for 6, and I may have poured a tiny bit of scorn upon that notion.
What's going to happen? Have they changed the ball?
I don't know.
I think
another one's been thrown on.
It's come back. They've lost. I think they lost the ball. That was the problem. It disappeared and they couldn't find it.
And is that one disinfected?
Well, it's got to be. It will have to be disinfectant. Here it is. It's been done now by umpire Robinson.
No, it's umpire Milnes. We've established it.
Oh, that's wrong as well, is it? Oh, right.
What we need, Simon, and what you should be campaigning for is numbers on the umpires' backs.
Well, I went by Andy's sheet.
Yes,
that's
what was listed on Cricket Info 2 days ago.
Oh, right.
Put your sheet together, do your own homework.
Here is Rashid bowling outside the off stump, clouted away towards deep cover, and they go through for a single.
Simon, don't you think he's getting more and more like Bill Frindle as the days pass?
Yeah. It won't be long.
Happens to them all, does it?
Well, we'll be bringing back Andrew Sampson before long, don't worry. He's an altogether different and kinder beast.
No, it's
165 for 9, last ball of the over. Oh, he goes past the outside edge. Asitha Fernando pushing forward, taken by Bairstow, whips off the bails a good measure. You never know. We've seen one stumping where the batsman was just holding the pose. So Rashid had 1 ball at Asitha Fernando, could not dismiss him. It's 165 for 9. There are 9 overs left. And 47 to Shanaka, and he will be on strike. And it's getting quite dark again, but I think
we need that breeze to keep going, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Do you keep blowing? It's just dropped a bit, but the cloud is dark above. I can see some blue sky, big patch of blue sky up there as well. And where the weather's coming from, it's quite bright. So I think we're okay. The floodlights are sort of taking over here. You feel like as though we're on the cusp of a shower. England would quite like to finish this off before that happens. Then we have half an hour break, and then England will chase down whatever.
183.
Yeah, 183. Yeah. Right, Shanaka. It's quite good fun, this, actually. Shanaka
he's doing a good job.
He's doing a good job. He waits, and here is Sam Curran bowling to him, and he clips that firmly into the onside. Now they will get 2 this time, even though it's Billings out there. Billings away. Oh no, they say, it's going to be a run out. There's going to be a horrible run out. One batter going for 2, the other one saying no, and that's it. They both end up at the same end, which for a neutral is always hilarious. But basically there was 2 there, but I think what happened was, because it was Billings, there was some doubt in the mind of one of the batters. Shanaka did not want to come back for the second, but Asitha Fernando did. He just ran back for the second. It was very good from Billings, mind you. He's really quick to his left and hurled the ball in, but really there should have been 2 there. Shouldn't there?
I think so. I think Shanaka should have taken the gamble. The man running to the danger end was in fact Fernando, running back to the bowler's end, where Billings threw the ball. I think Shanaka might have slipped slightly at the end of completing his first run, He set off with the idea of maintaining the strike and getting to. Anyway, a bit of a fiasco, a bit of a vignette of really Sri Lanka's tour.
Yeah.
That, just things haven't gone quite right at all.
It was clipped out to deep mid-wicket. I'm just watching on the replay now. And Shanaka said no. He said no to the non-striker, Asitha Fernando. He just kept running. Yeah. And they both ended up at the same end, and Bairstow took off the bails. And they're walking off 166 all out. So you were right, Victor.
Well,
never going to get 183. 166 all out.
But it should be a paltry total. It's quite a good surface, this, in that there is a little bit, I think, for the new ball bowler. It goes through quite nicely. And no doubt Chameera and others will give it their all, but it's not the sort of total that wins you a match. Yeah. And you could take, I don't know what the predict viz would tell us about how many overs. You can never tell with England. I mean, they could get these in 20 overs, or if they lose early wickets, it might take them 40.
Well, up at Durham, where they needed that 183, well, the 186 as it turned out, it took them 34.5 overs. It took them longer than they would have anticipated when they made a rollicking start. They were 54 for no wicket in the 5th over.
And then suddenly a few wickets
and then changed round.
I mean, I wonder if, this series hasn't taught us much, I don't think. But it has reminded us that in white ball cricket, someone who bats like Joe Root is very valuable, because in the two run chases, and they've hardly been chases so far, England have lost wickets quite quickly at certain points, but they've had the rock solid Root, who's not been bowled out yet. 79 not out in the first game, 68 not out, playing sensibly whilst all the others do their extravagant stuff at the other end. So his value, well, we all knew about that, particularly in this format. And what will be fascinating as we get closer and closer to the World Cup is whether they decide that actually, when you get to the really serious stuff, on what could be spin-friendly pitches.
Because the next World Cup is in India.
Well, I'm thinking World T20.
Right,
actually,
okay, fine, yeah.
Which is UAE.
Yeah.
But there will be a lot of slow bowling there as well. You definitely, Root was bound to play in a 50-over game. But there is a strong case of having Root in your T20 side if you're playing on those sort of surfaces for the moment. Partly because he's got so much else on his plate. He's not part of the T20 team. He wants to play in the World T20 World Cup though. And I suspect, I still think he's got a very good chance of doing so.
Well, it's an interesting one, that, because, of course, we talked about this the other day. He's the Ashes captain, and if they get to the final and then they've got a quarantine for 2 weeks, it takes you quite close to the first test. To the first test, yeah. I mean, and you're the leader, aren't you? You're the Ashes captain. You're the main focus of that. You lead the team to Australia. And he will be without 2 or 3, of course, like the Stokes and Butler and Jofra Archer, possibly. Those sort of players. So we'll see what happens with that one. But I tend to agree with you. But in terms of the next World Cup, you're absolutely right. I mean, someone like Root is absolutely central to England's chances. Yeah. Right. We might get a shower here. The covers are coming on. But it's sort of like, if it rains now, that's fine, because we're in the half-hour break. Russell Arnold, well, that just about summed it up, didn't it, that last Sri Lanka wicket?
The chaos. The decision-making, not there at all, but nice to see Dasun Shanaka apply himself like he has, making some good decisions, playing some good shots. He is a strong striker of the ball, but opted to hang in there and try and accumulate as many runs as possible. 166 never going to be enough against this England team.
No, it doesn't seem like it, Russell. Okay, thanks very much. More from Russell later. Now, you may have been one of the 25 million plus. By the way, Shanaka 166, we didn't confirm that. Shanaka 48 not out at the end. 3 for 28 for Woakes, 4 for 35 from Curran, 1 for 35 Rashid, and the run out at the end, and Asitha Fernando run out for naught. Yeah, so you may have been one of the 25 million plus who followed another England team last night. Fantastic performance by Gareth Southgate's side. You can hear all about that in the Daily Euros podcast on BBC Sounds. Southgate is a big cricket fan. A couple of summers ago, he spent the summer playing village cricket in Yorkshire's Nidderdale League. He's not the only England football manager to enjoy their cricket. We've been lucky enough to welcome some previous incumbents to the TMS box as viewed from the boundary guests, and we can hear from a couple now. Shortly, Roy Hodgson with Jonathan Agnew. First, we can hear Graham Taylor, who joined Brian Johnson back in July 1991 at Edgbaston during a West Indies test. Taylor was the England manager at the time, and with the Steel Band playing in the background, he told Johners about his love for cricket.
My heroes basically were more of a national basis, really, because I was a minor counties situation. I mean, my first things were obviously May and Ken Barrington. Ken Barrington I never met, but I used to... When unfortunately, when I heard that he passed away, that was one of the things that will always remain with me. The fact that Ken Barrington had died to a relatively young man, as I was at the time, was a very upsetting. I'd never met the man, but he was a throwback to my boyhood, where these people meant a lot to me. And I'll always remember Ken Barrington, yet I never met him.
He was a very intense character, took things terribly to heart.
Did he? Yes.
And, I mean, I took him back after he'd played up here, and he played a very, very slow innings up to, I think he was about an hour between 89 to 100.
Yes.
And then when he got to 100, he hit 5 falls running or something.
Yes.
And he got tremendously criticised for that. And I took him back, and he was so depressed, and it meant so much to him, because he was actually dropped for one test match. He came back and made a couple more hundreds, of course. But he was, everything meant so much to him, and on this West Indies tour, a particular one, you know, he'd taken it very badly.
Mind you, we've just seen Marshall stay an hour without scoring, and nobody makes any comment about that.
No. Well, yeah, I know, but because he fought for England. I mean, it was like seeing the Union Jack walk out when Barrington went up.
Well, I think probably that was something that...
No, he'd be the sort of character you would love to have in any football team.
Well, I think in anything, and I think at the present situation, I mean, even the cricket situation, when you're up against it, you want the fighters. You've got to have the fighters. You've got to have those people who show some stickability. I mean, I know that you've asked me about the football scene. I mean, basically, over the last 3 seasons, certainly since the last European Nations Cup in Germany, the England football team have had some very good results. I mean, they've played 38 games and only lost twice. That's at national level. And it has a very, very good run. And, I mean, I'm pleased to be in the latter part of it. But I very much recognise that it's when you come to the European Championships, it's when you come to the World Cup that people actually assess in their minds how successful any national side is. But it's a good run over 3 years that the football side has had.
You realise your captain is a very good wicketkeeper.
Oh, I realise that, yes.
You let him off enough to play.
Well, fortunately, as I say, he's contracted to Tottenham, and that's their problem. But I know that Gary is very, very interested and is a good cricketer in his own right.
But he could have played for Leicestershire, I think, at cricket, and he's a member of MCC by right. I mean,
Well, he actually did. I mean, I think I'm about sort of 8,000 and odd in the list, and I just miss out. I really was rather foolish, because I believe if you play so many games for certain teams,
if you're put up to be a player, you can play 6 games in one season, 6 the next.
Something before you're 40 or 41, though. I was reading all of these regulations, and I looked at it, and when I was reading these, I was 42, and I thought, I've missed out again. So I'm about 8,000 on the list. They keep asking me for extra little bits of money to get me lower down the list. So.
Do you bowl at all?
No, I'm not really a bowler. I like the batting. I like batting in a funny sort of way. My father has always said to me that one of the worst things, and I suppose I'll open a sort of talking point here, but one of the worst things he ever did was to send me for coaching. He said that when I was before I had that, when I saw the ball, I used to try to hit it, and when I came back from coaching, then in fact I tried to play everything technically correct. And that he always felt that as a young... I mean, I think he would have very much liked me, actually, to have been able to develop not only my footballing ability, which fortunately I got a career in professional football, but my cricketing ability as well. But he often felt that after I had about 18 months coaching, and I came back and I then tried to play everything. Now, I always remember as a young lad, anything down my leg side as a left-hander, I loved it. Yeah. But then after the coaching, I seemed to have to play every ball properly.
I think you see, all coaches went right. I mean, you get someone like Dennis Compton, who was a natural. He went to a chap called Archie Fowler at Lord's in the 30s, who saw him and said, right, I won't tell you anything, but he did just teach him the very basic forward and defensive stroke, because Dennis, in the end, was one of the best defensive batsmen, if necessary.
Yeah.
But they let him do all the unorthodox strokes. Don't try and do the orthodox.
I'm sure that's right. I'm sure. I mean, and being involved and being accused of many things, really, as a manager, and listening to people say as coaches as well. I mean, I think that the worst thing to no coaching, in many respects, is better than bad coaching, and I've always believed that. I always look back. I don't know really, and the person who's responsible for me, but one thing I remember about that coaching was this business that you must play yourself in. Now, prior to that, if a ball had been bowled to me, the first ball, and it was there for hitting, I always used to think, well, you used to hit that one. But that's one thing I always remember: play yourself in. And I tended, whenever I play cricket, to be quite boring. But the worst thing about trying to play yourself in, I always find, is if you get out. Because
you've lost the whole thing anyhow.
You've lost it anyhow,
But basically, a bad ball is a bad ball.
Well,
it's the first ball or not.
But anyhow, not that I would ever have made any real level as a cricketer, but I enjoy it.
I don't know. I know you've been manager of Lincoln, Watford and Aston Villa. How much coaching have you done yourself?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing, because I think that I've done a reasonable amount of coaching, but I'm a big believer in playing to people's strengths, and I've always believed that. In other words, I don't believe in taking people out and coaching on a real weakness that they have. I believe in coaching people to their strengths, because I think that's something that a person is good at. One is interested in getting better at that, and I think that it gives him a tremendous amount of confidence, and consequently any weaknesses, and we all have weaknesses, I tend to feel that those weaknesses improve through having a greater confidence. I think if you concentrate very much so on somebody's weaknesses, you don't necessarily get the big rewards. I think if you coach on somebody's strengths, you get big rewards. And then the weaknesses, because nobody's perfect, the weaknesses look after themselves, because the strengths come through and they override the weaknesses. So in many respects, I'd like to think that both individually and collectively, my coaching is based on, or has been based very much on, getting people to believe in themselves and to do what they're good at and to do it even better, and to let the bad things look after themselves and ignore them.
You've got to be a tremendous psychologist, though, haven't you? You've got to treat every single person differently, because everyone is different.
Well, everyone is different. All this business, about people say, I don't like it when people say he treats everybody the same, because I don't. I'll treat you the same if you are the same, but you're not, so you treat everybody differently. But I think overall what you try to do is to try to get a feeling that in fact you have a great confidence in your own ability, and collectively. I think that's very important.
How do you get to know people? I know there's a circuit, you go around it a lot, but to get to know an individual, do you wait till he comes to join the team, or
well, I mean, I was 20 years as a manager, because I had to finish the game relatively at a young age.
Well, just tell us about that. You had a hip trouble.
I had a hip injury, yes. So I finished when I was 28, and I became the manager of Lincoln. I mean, basically, I became the manager simply because there was a boardroom difference, as there tends to be in football, and somebody supported me. Yes, well, it's no different, is it, really, in any shape? And my first 9 games as a manager, we drew 7 and lost 2. And I remember people at Sinsel Bank at Lincoln shouting, "Taylor out, Taylor out." Now, when you're 28 years of age and you're married and you've 2 girls under sort of 4 as they were at that time, or under 3, and you've got a mortgage. Now that's pressure. Pressure's not the top of the first division, and pressure in many respects is not really being the manager of the England side. Pressure really is basically if you get out of the job and you don't know where your next job is going to come from.
I tell you what I'd always done. If I'd been a manager, before I signed a contract, I would say I cannot be sacked in the middle of the season. I'm prepared to be sacked at the end of the season, or to my contract to be terminated. I think sacked is an awful word, anyhow.
Well, I think there are 2 things really that we ought to look at, really, from managers' points of view. I think that it's a give and take. I think if you can't be sacked, then neither should you walk out.
No,
I think in that situation,
you abide by your contract.
I think in that situation, I think contract should be something. But unfortunately, not just in football, but in a lot of sports, contracts seem to be just a word now. Yeah. And when it suits either party, they're very easily terminated one way or the other. And That, I think, doesn't help the status or standing of any of the professional games.
I mean, how are you influenced by the press? You get a bad press. I mean, poor Mickey Stewart gets a bad press. When things go right, it's all okay. But, I mean, do you read them a lot? Do you try and meet the people and talk to them about it?
I think what I try to do, in fact, be very open in terms of answer questions.
Right.
You know that you're going to be abused. I mean, the disappointing aspect is that so many things that you say are abused and misused to create headlines. But I don't think I'm particularly going to alter that. So one of the things that I very, very much decided is that, and I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but I basically read as little as I can. Far more people know about the things I'm certain that have been written about me and about my team than I do know so. And it's the best way to go.
And I tell you what,
isn't it hard so-and-so
for a minute, I'm
I'm
appointing you manager of the cricket team now for about a minute and a half during the lunch interval. What would you do in the dressing room now? Would you say anything to them? Would you leave it to the captain, who's after all still batting? What would you do?
Captain or manager, what it is now, you're in there, you're scrapping, boys. I tell you what, you're scrapping now, and you're scrapping on a wicket that's unpredictable.
Right.
Now, there's not a lot we can do about it. If you get a ball that now shoots through like that, there's not a lot you can do about it. If you get a ball that comes up over your head, there's not much you can do about it. But you can do something about silly shots. You can do something about that. And I think that's the thing that you're saying now. And you've got to have a great belief in yourself. And what you don't want to do, you don't want to be walking about with your heads down. I mean, I'm risking things here, and I know I'm on the air, but like you and a few of us, I would have liked to see Mike Atherton get to the wicket a bit quick.
He walked in very dejected, as if he didn't want to play.
And I'm saying this, you know, with all it creates an image, you see, and people look at that and they wonder, well, hold on a minute. Now, they may be totally wrong, and I could be wrong saying this, but you're watching that, and there's a lot of supporters here are watching that.
The late Graham Taylor wouldn't be the last England football manager to join us. The summer of 2012 will live long in the memory for us in Britain, a seemingly endless stream of golden days as the Olympic Games arrived in London. Well, prior to the Games beginning, England started a test series against a mighty South African side. The first match of the series was played at the Oval. It was a chastening few days for England's bowlers, put to the sword as Hashim Amla scored an unbeaten 311 in a first innings total of 637 for 2 declared. Just as that remarkable batting performance concluded, I crossed the ground to the pavilion where the England football manager, Roy Hodgson, was waiting in the sunshine. Just a month earlier, Hodgson had seen his side knocked out of Euro 2012 on, you guessed it, penalties against Italy. But here he was enjoying some downtime in South London following his other great sporting passion.
It's such a great experience to watch cricket from this vantage point, you know, where you feel almost that you're part of the game. It's so different to watch it on TV, which is what I normally do.
Yeah. And I mean, the Surrey County Cricket Club is not new to you, is it? I mean, this is your neck of the woods, really, around here, is it?
Oh, yeah, Surrey was my team, as it were, because I was born in Croydon, which was Surrey in those days. It's now really a part of London, but it was used to be Croydon Surrey. So, of course, as a child growing up, you support your team, which happened to be Crystal Palace for football and Surrey for cricket. So I have some memories of those days sort of following it. But I only made one visit here, and that was in the early 1960s when I was still a teenager, and that was to see the Australian visiting team.
Ah, why did they draw you here in particular? Just because they're the Aussies, I suppose, is it?
Well, I suppose, you know, they were one of the top teams at the time. I think they were preparing for a test match, and I was a big fan of one of their batsmen, a guy called Neil Harvey. And
you're not alone. Very stylish. He's an old boy now. He's still with us, you know.
Fantastic. It's good to hear. No, he was a wonderfully stylish player. He was everything I would have loved to have been if I'd have had any talent for the game.
Yeah. Which you had none, are you saying?
Basically, yes.
Oh. And how do you know that? I mean, did you play a bit? I mean, in school you must have played and so.
Yes, I was lucky to go to a school which had a good cricket team, so we won a couple of finals, and I played a little bit of club cricket after that when I was obviously playing football here. But I left England really to play football in South Africa in 1973, and then again I left in 76 to start my coaching career, so I've had a very long hiatus from the game.
Yeah, and do you feel that you sort of lost touch with cricket? I suppose these days it's easier, isn't it, with the internet and so on to watch, to keep up with things, but I suppose if you're away for that length of time, it's a big chunk away.
Well, my memories really go back to those, you know, players of the 50s and early 60s where, you know, you're young, you sort of really immerse yourself in in a sport. I mean, obviously football was always my favourite sport, but I love cricket as well. And from that time, I can remember lots of names and lots of players. But then, as I say, when I went abroad, once you go to Sweden and Switzerland and Italy, you can virtually forget cricket unless you are a real aficionado of the game, because you'd have to work so hard to find out what was going on.
Yeah. But Surrey, of course, were so strong in those days, weren't they? Laker, Locke, PBH May, people like that. I suppose John Edrich starting to break into the scene. Are those the names we're talking about?
Absolutely. Alex Father, of course, Mickey.
Yes.
And I remember them all. Yes, I remember those names. Ken Barrington. I remember all those names very well. And I remember seeing Edrich once bat against in a sort of charity match at Norwood and smash the ball all over the field against these amateurs. So it was. I remember that time very, very well. But of course, it's distant memories now because we are talking nigh on 50 years ago, I suppose.
Yeah. He was here a couple of days ago, John. I think on the first day he was here. So there you go. It's lovely when old sportsmen catch up. In fact, have you ever met him or not?
No. No. To be honest, I haven't met many cricketers at all. I was lucky enough to make Alex acquaintance. I knew Mick, of course, a little bit because he was involved a lot in football. But apart from Mick Stewart and Alec, I can't really say and Bob Willis I've had some contact with, but otherwise I've not been lucky enough to meet many cricketers.
Yeah. So in those days, of course, you could combine both sports, couldn't you? I mean, professionally, a colleague of mine, Chris Balderston, he's famed for scoring 100 one day for Leicester at Chesterfield, I think it was, and he nipped up to Doncaster and played a league football match that day, which is sad it doesn't happen anymore. But your season's too long, Roy. It's all trouble.
Yeah, that's right. Games. No, that's right. It is. It's. But I mean, cricket's changed a lot, hasn't it? It's changed a lot, not only in the formulas with the 2020s and the one-day cricket, but it's also changed now that the England players are fully professional, and it's obviously impacted, I guess, on county cricket, which I must admit I don't follow to any great extent anymore. But I think it's made the Test cricket and the one-day cricket much more accessible, if you like, to a wider range of people.
Your life's changed, hasn't it? I mean, my word, as soon as people knew that we're here, I mean, there's photographers everywhere, there's kids coming up. How are you finding all that? Do you enjoy it? You seem quite kind of quiet sort of fellow to me.
I don't know that quiet, really. I don't know how much I enjoy it either. I mean, it's I enjoy the job, and I certainly enjoy being England national team manager, and I accept that a lot of things go with that, but I don't seek out the publicity or the TV cameras or the press cameras, but I realise that they're going to find me, so I'll have to learn to live with it. But in the past, I've always just tried to be as natural as possible, and as a result, I'm sure I shall get caught out on many an occasion and a photograph doing something I perhaps shouldn't be doing, but that's the way.
I'm sure you won't, Roy. Hey, come on. Now, I mean, it's a funny job you've got, isn't it? I mean, it's a fantastic job, but here we are at cricket, watching the England cricket team totally under control of Andy Flower and the board, and they're on central contract, and it's very much a country first and club second that we have in cricket. Completely opposite to you. Is it frustrating for you, that aspect of it?
Well, it hasn't been so far. I mean, I'm not. It has been in the past when I've coached other national teams. I do realise the club national team conflict's always going to exist, but it was no problem during the Euros. All the clubs were very, very cooperative. We had no problem at all with the players, and I think the national team football probably is still underestimated. The fact that 22 million people in England tuned in to see our game against Italy is really quite incredible. So I think any time when maybe it's suggested that national team football isn't as important to people as Champions League football, I think we should maybe look at the figures, because certainly more people watched our game against Italy than watched the Champions League final.
Yeah, for what little I know about it, it seems that the public love England football and they want England to do well. It's more of a club issue, is it, with managers and players and so on there, and availability and so on. Is that more where the problem lies?
Well, I think it's not a problem as such, but we can never get away from the fact that we as a national team don't pay the players. You refer to cricket, where the players are contracted and earn their living for playing for England. Our players really, they play for England for the glory, for the honour of representing their country, but their money and their livelihood is provided by the club. So in a conflict situation, it's obviously going to be very difficult for them, because which master do you serve? The master that you want to serve because you happen to be English and want to play for your country, or the person who pays you your wage on which you live.
Yes.
Well, that was Roy Hodgson, the former England football manager, speaking to Jonathan Agnew back in 2012, and before that, another former England football manager, Graham Taylor, talking to Brian Johnson back in July 1991. We thought we'd play you that based on what happened last night, when 25 million people followed England's team on television and radio on BBC. And a remarkable night, and perhaps another one coming up on Wednesday on the eve of the start of the Pakistan series in Cardiff on Thursday, and we'll be on air at 12:45 for that match. It's a 1 o'clock start in Cardiff. Now it's raining here in Bristol. We're in the interval, although that's supposed to end in about 5 minutes. There will be no prompt resumption. Lots of umbrellas up around the ground, and it is dark all around the county ground in Bristol at the moment. The lights are really beaming down brightly, the floodlights, so we're going to have another delay here. England need 167 to win. We are in the mid-innings break. 166 all out Sri Lanka and 41.1 overs, with Chris Woakes taking 3 for 28 and Tom Curran 4 for 35. Dasun Shanaka was 48 not out for Sri Lanka, but it was another poor batting display from them. And when play does get underway, and we're pretty confident it will, I think it's one of those days where it's not just the rain sort of filled in, the showers are scudding past. At the moment we're in sort of quite a big shower that's hanging over a lot of this part of Bristol. So the rain is coming down, the covers are on, we might be in for a bit of a delay. I wonder what's happening in the LV County Championship. It's a new round of games today after a break for the Blast. Some vital matches as well as we move towards that split at the not exactly the halfway point of the season, but after 10 games of the season. Kevin Howells is at Edgbaston, where he was hoping to watch Dom Sibley and Ben Stokes in action today. What news, Kevin?
Well, you know me, I'm renowned for my positivity and happiness generally, Simon. And I have to say that even though a couple of hours ago I thought exactly the opposite of what I'm going to say now, which was that I didn't think we see any cricket, I think we might see some cricket here in Birmingham today. We've got quite a lot of blue sky, actually. Can't quite see the sun. Predominantly it's cloudy. And just as I try to be positive about things, I see if the weather's coming from there. I haven't quite worked out where the rain is coming from today, but if it's coming over in that right-hand corner, perhaps I won't be so optimistic. But basically, the facts are these. Durham against Warwickshire is a big game because the top 2 of 3 groups go through to Division 1 with a chance to become county champions, and it's a tight group, is this. Warwickshire currently lead the group on 120 points. 4th place at Durham, and they're just 9 points further back, so it shows just how tight it is. And you throw in the Dom Sibleys, the Ben Stokes to the game, lots to look forward to in the match. But we had a toss. Durham won the toss. They decided they were going to have a bowl first, and that's as far as it went, because just at that moment basically some real heavy rain fell. And we've had that frustration sense of every time that you think you're going to get some cricket, generally not the heaviest of rain, but some rain starts to fall. And I think that perhaps is what is happening just again here now, just the slightest drizzle. So the umpires go out, they have a look, the ground staff going in this team, get rid of the covers, they mop it up, and there's a lot of water to mop up. They do a great job, and then it rains again. So at the moment, I'm afraid, nothing to report in terms of action here. In the case of other matches, they've got an inspection at 3:45, the game between Lancashire and Kent, that's in Group 3. Lancashire currently top that group. The same group with Yorkshire and Northants, game being played at Northampton, and Northamptonshire are 3rd in the table, Yorkshire in 2nd, and Yorkshire have got, after 47 overs of play, they've had some interruptions with the weather, to a score of 116 for 5. The story was, and I'm just going to double check on this, still is, surrounding 20-year-old George Hill. He's a lad from Keighley, Yorkshire. He's opening for Yorkshire today. It's just his 4th first-class match, and he's got a career best 61 not out as things stand, from 134 deliveries, 8 fours. So he's there with another young player, a wicketkeeper called Harry Duke, who I think is playing his 4th game, is Harry. So some young players there. Simon Kerrigan, the spinner, has picked up a couple of wickets, 2 for 28 in that game, but that is a very tight and important match in that group, as I say, because it's 3rd versus 2nd. Sussex and Glamorgan also underway in Group 3 at Hove, where Sussex are 23 for 2 against Glamorgan. They're hoping for a restart at 3:25 in Group 1 at Trent Bridge, where Nottinghamshire taking on Derbyshire. Derbyshire is 74 for 3. In terms of positions in the group in that game, Nottinghamshire 3rd, so it's the same group as this Warwickshire-Durham match, but Nottinghamshire in 3rd on 115 points. They're 5 points behind Warwickshire in the top position, and they're taking on Derbyshire. Derbyshire 74 for 3, and you go to Group 2, and 2 very important games here. Hampshire now 138 for 4 against Surrey. Surrey look to be more or less out of the running for a top 2 finish, but they've come late on the rails, if you like, without a break because of the Vitality Blast, but they've got a bit of form going. They've also got some pretty interesting characters and players back in their team, and in their team for the first time. For instance, Carl Jameson turning out there for Surrey, but it's Hampshire 138 for 4 with Colin de Grandhomme. He's just gone out to the middle, he's yet to get off the mark, but Ian Holland is 53 not out. Wickets being shared around, including Jamie Overton's picked up wickets, so too as Ricky Clark there. And if we just make sure that we've got one other score to bring you, and that's the game between Somerset and Leicestershire. The backstory of this one is that Somerset are going well. They topped their group on 119 points. That's 10 points clear of Gloucestershire, and Gloucestershire don't start their game until tomorrow. And the latest they've got there at Taunton is Somerset 134 without loss against a Leicestershire team who are minus 7 players, who are having to isolate at the moment for reasons that we know all about, of course. And Devon Conway on his championship debut for Somerset is 63 not out, and Steve Davis is on 61, so 134 for no wicket. And there we are, I'm afraid no players yet here in Birmingham, a little bit of action elsewhere.
Yeah, the Summers belong to Devon Conway so far, part of that successful New Zealand side. He's made a very good start to his time with Somerset. 63 not out at Taunton. They have taken an early tea. There's some rain around there as well. We've got some rain at Bristol. It's very dark. It feels like it's about 8 o'clock in the evening, but we've got a heavy cloud over the ground at the moment. And just to say as well, you can follow all those county matches, crucial games over the next few days on the BBC Sport website. So no play here at the moment. It's a little bit of rain around. We are reasonably confident we will get some play, and of course we can go until 7:30 tonight. England need 167 I should say to win the game. Sri Lanka bowled out for 166, so I think we're reasonably confident that we'll get a positive outcome one way or the other in this match, but the covers are on at the moment, and the ground staff are just making their way off the ground, actually waiting for the rain to stop. Now this weekend marks the 70th birthday of the legendary fast bowler Sir Richard Hadlee, the first bowler to take 400 test wickets, one of a golden era of all-rounders and a favourite at Trent Bridge. We're going to celebrate his birthday now. In a moment we'll hear from his New Zealand captain for many years, Jeremy Coney, and his former Nottinghamshire teammate Mick Newell. But we last caught up with Sir Richard 3 years ago when Jonathan Agnew chatted to Hadlee in his hometown of Christchurch.
Great to be with you. Great to see you. It's been a long time, hasn't it?
And that smile again. That smile. I saw it a few times.
I smiled when I bowled to you.
Well, you did. In a slightly knowing sort of way, I felt. But it was the end of the run. But lovely memories of a really happy time of playing cricket. I mean, it was hard, and it was. I was telling stories yesterday. But I think we enjoyed ourselves, didn't we?
Yeah, well, my time was 78 to 87 as far as county cricket was concerned. Nottinghamshire, of course, won a couple of county championships, which was great. 3 Lords final appearances, winning the NatWest in my final year in 87. So for me, that was probably the greatest opportunity in my cricketing career, was to play professional cricket, because if you do it 5-6 days a week, or anything 5-6 days a week, you do get into those good habits, disciplines and routines. So really it fine-tuned me as a cricketer, let alone as a bowler, but made me an all-rounder, because I was having opportunities batting at 6, 7 and 8.
Very annoying opportunities in my experience. You go there, slash around all over the place.
Yeah, that's right. I like to attack, you know that. But obviously it fine-tuned me, made me a better player, and not only did that help Nottinghamshire cricket, but of course New Zealand cricket, with all that experience that I could bring back as a professional to pass on to fellow players.
That's what's important. And I remember, there was a time where people were saying, "Oh, we're training up all these overseas bowlers." Malcolm Marshall, I think, was a name that was often mentioned, and you and others. But what was, I think, really good about that time was the way that you all gave something back. You were very committed to the counties you were playing for, after all, and you did give something back, not just to your own team, but I mentioned a story with you and the no balls and so on with me. It was just it wasn't all take, but for the guy who was there as the overseas pro, you did a lot for the county game as well.
That's right, but when you're playing for a county, it's like a family, and there was such a thing as loyalty in those days. I mean, you play for one county as an overseas player, and things have certainly changed today because players come in and out for 6 weeks because of international competition or for whatever reason. But I was never ever going to leave Notts. I mean, I couldn't do that. I couldn't move to another county if there was an opportunity to do it. So you become that family, and the fact that it was 10 years, you get to know the players, and you can pass on that information or knowledge. And we had a pretty useful attack when you look at Clive Rice and Mike Hendrick, myself, and Kevin Cooper was a very underrated, good swing bowler. Andy Pick came on the scene. There was Pete Hacker and these fellas.
As an 18-year-old straight from school, my second first-class match was facing you and Clive Rice. I had little plastic pads and those little sort of schoolboy gloves.
Is that why you never pushed forward?
I didn't get forward very far, did I, Richard? It was a horrible experience because Ricey would be snarling. Actually, I mean, you never really said anything, did you? But Ricey would have a few words. And I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, he was a tough man.
He was a great player, and of course, being South African and South African cricket being isolated from world cricket, he was denied the opportunity to play international cricket. And his test match actually was playing county cricket and facing the West Indian fast bowlers in the opposing sides. And he would take on the likes of Garner and Holding and Wayne Daniel and these fellas. And that's how he measured his test, if you like. And of course, when South Africa came back into international cricket, he did take the South African team to India, but for some one-dayers. But he was 40 and well past his best. But as an all-rounder, would have been up there with the four of us, in my opinion. And he was tough, uncompromising, a leader, led from the front, great qualities. But of course, sadly, he's no longer with us now, and passed on a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and in the middle of all this, you've got complete sort of juxtaposition of Derek Randall. I mean, how did you cope with him, for goodness sake? Because there's you, very disciplined, really sort of mechanical, beautifully grooved bowler and everything else, and you've got Clive Rice, who said this big, tough snot, and Rags. I mean, where on earth did he fit into all that?
Well, I mean, every sporting team, every business for that matter, needs to have the character.
Yes.
Good for the old morale in the dressing room. And Derek was a fidgety player. Look, a wonderful fielder, one of the great fielders of all time. And as a batsman, once he got in and got going, he was lovely to watch. But he was sort of the master of the one-liners, really, and the fact that he was quite nervous before going out to bat.
Anyways.
I mean, he would stand in front of the mirror and practice his batting and his calling. Yes, no, wait, oops, sorry, because he bowled in so many run-outs during his career. But no, he was a great character and a great servant of Nottinghamshire cricket. And of course, I think he played 44 tests for England as well. So and took Dennis Lilly on, didn't he?
In
that centenary test.
Yeah. But when people talk about the all-rounders of your era, Richard, you and Kapil Dev and Imran and Ian Botham and so on, was there great competition between you when you played each other?
Absolutely.
Individually?
Yeah, yes. There was a lot of respect too, I've got to say. But the competition between us, we knew what each other was doing around the world. Either we'd hear it on the radio that so-and-so's done this, and or you read it in the newspaper, not like social media today where it's instant. But whenever you had that one-on-one clash or battle with your opposing all-rounder, you lifted your performance. You didn't want to get out to them. You wanted to get them out. And invariably it was the all-rounder that dominated the all-rounder and the opposition that helped affect the result of the game. So, I'd like to think I was the better bowler of the four, but the batting was my weakness. Right. And I've always said that, to me, Imran Khan, of the four, with Beefy and Kapil and myself, was the more complete all-rounder. And I say that because he was a potent strike bowler. As a batsman, he could bat anywhere in the top 4 or 6 for that matter and play a type of innings that was required. And of course, he led his team and he was a capable fielder. So I think he was a pretty consistent performer. And I think I was the better bowler, but my batting, I got 2 Test hundreds. The rest probably got 6, 8 or 10 Test hundreds. Beefy was inspirational for England because he didn't really know what what he would produce on the day, but what a great character, what a great performer, entertainer, and did some wonderful things for England.
Yes.
Sometimes a little bit up and down. And Capel did remarkably well, being bowling in sort of subcontinent conditions, and to beat my world record of Test wickets by 4, even though it took him 40 more tests.
Oh, you would throw that in.
Just thought I'd throw that one in. But he's a tremendous performer for India with bat and ball, and those little challenges were quite inspirational, actually, and there was mutual respect between us as well.
The umpire's coming out. I want to ask you one more. When I find the character of the all-rounder interesting, often combative, in your face, beefy. I think Ben Stokes, these sort of people, they are those big characters as well. You're actually quite a quiet guy. You just got on and did your business.
Well, I didn't talk very much out in the middle.
Were you sort of going inside?
Oh well, but early on I was a little bit fired up, and histrionics and that sort of thing. That gets knocked out of you very quickly when you play in English county cricket. So the talking is done with your skill set, with your batting and your bowling. So my presence, I remember Greg Matthews saying that Hadley was the most intimidating he ever faced, because he didn't say anything.
Oh, really?
So it was a wink, a nod, a glare, turn your back, get back to your bowling, mate. You didn't have to open your mouth, and Matthews knew that he was in a contest. So you can do it in a very subtle way and still have a presence.
I remember that smile, Richard, and I've really enjoyed it over the last 40 minutes of us. It's lovely to catch up again.
Pleasure.
Really, thank you so much for coming in. There we go, a couple of years ago that was, in Christchurch, when we last ran into the great Richard Hadley. Jeremy Coney, you captained 15 times? I guess he would have played in most of those, would he?
Oh yes, definitely.
Yes.
Even in '86 when we were over here, Aggers, Richard, while he played the test matches, it was his benefit year for Notts.
Right.
And so he didn't appear for the rest and for the major part of the tour. And in those days you were still playing a number of county matches and the TCCB or TCB 11.
Yes.
And so he wasn't there during those at all. So he didn't actually tour in that sense with us, but he had suddenly arrived for the internationals.
So filtered in and out.
Yeah, but still, he made such a difference to our side, of course. If you had to pick one man, who had the most influence in New Zealand cricket and won most games of cricket for New Zealand, it was clearly Richard over the 90-odd years.
So analytical. I mean, we talk about the other all-rounders at that time. You got Imran, you got Botham, you got Kapil Dev. Big characters, big figures, including Ben Stokes going. Richard actually was completely different, I think, wasn't he? I mean, you tell me, but quite quiet, very measured, not a big raconteur, storyteller, bon viveur, nothing like that. I mean, he didn't sort of own, I would imagine, the dressing room like Ian Botham used to do. He used to plonk himself in the middle, and it was his territory, and the rest of you sort of moved around him. I can't imagine Richard being like that.
No, he was a lone figure. He was kind of locked in a battle with himself, really. He set rather lofty goals. He would sit on his own. At the end of the play in the dressing room, he would be writing his diary, things that had happened during the day.
On the field stuff.
While we were still, either that or a book that he was about to write, but both. And while we were having a laugh and a beer, he would be... He would be doing those things. He kind of he was a champion, and he helped us all. I think if we bothered to watch, because I suppose the thing about champions that I felt was that there's an aspect of longevity about it. You can't just do it for a season. It's not a single masterpiece. It's a tournament. It's year after year of high performance. It's a CV and an oeuvre and a biography, if you like. And that's what Richard was. It was never just a sudden, comet across the sky. It was something that was long lasting. And there are lots of people kind of like that, aren't there? I mean, if you think of Navratilova, if you think of Federer,
right, yes,
Michael Jordan. We had a few in New Zealand, a guy called Richie McCaw, who was a rugby player, or Peter Snell, the runner.
Right.
We had people like that, and Richard joined that group for me. Basically, I think unhappy people. I don't mean unhappy sad in that way. I mean unhappy with the status quo, the things that they're doing now. Constantly reviewing, looking at what they do at the moment and refining, making incremental changes to their craft and what they did.
Always looking to improve.
Always. Yeah. Richard was, whether it was the way he held the ball, how far in the fingers, where was the ball, in the hand that he ran up. Was the head important as you ran? Because really, was a bowler, if you think about it, from the top of your mark to your delivery stride, you're a runner.
Yes.
And so he would practice those sorts of things and arriving at the right speed. I remember one time at the Basin Reserve, he came out with a stopwatch, and he said, "Could you hold that and use that for me?" I said, "Oh, sure. What?" And he said, and then he went back and he said, "I want you to time from the start of my run-up, the top of my mark, how long it takes me to get to my delivery stride, and time that for me." So I did that. I thought, this is a bit weird, but okay. No one else has asked me to do that before. And I'd say, he'd say, "How much?" And I'd say 5.3 seconds. He said, no good. And he'd turn back and go away again, and he'd run in again. And we did this for probably 25 minutes, just timing each one. And he'd just sort of look up at me, and I'd say 4.8, and then 5. It was all around about this. Occasionally it might go to 5.5, whatever. And he said, "Oh, no, that's awful." And back we'd go, and we'd keep going. We sort of settled on a number after a while that he sort of had it grooved in it, whatever it was, 5.1 or 4.9, I can't remember. But he got to a point where he said he was happy and content about that. And I gave him the watch back, and I thought, what was all that about? But when you think about it, it was actually that the speed of the run-up, the length of the stride that you had at certain parts of your run-up, I would have thought. But I didn't go into it enough with him. But he got to that number, and he said, that's it. And he was busy grooving in the speed that he wanted to run up the next day with the wind behind him, at the Basin Reserve, that he could get to a point where he was delivering in perfect balance, so that it enabled him to bowl the ball how he wanted and how he did. It's a very small little memory.
Didn't a lot of it come from his father? He mentioned Walter, actually, his father, who played for New Zealand, in that chat that I had with him. But he was an accountant, I think I'm right in saying.
He was.
And used to really measure very precisely the performance of Richard and Dale, his brother, I think. And they'd sort of sit down at dinner when they'd played cricket that day, and Walter would go through minutely all the aspects of their cricket and be quite critical, I think. And so
he was.
So he did actually engender that ever searching for improvement that Richard had.
Yes, he was the captain of 49, the 49 side, and had planned out quite often, as accountants do. They had the sort of the routine of, you will come on in the 13th over from down there and you'll bowl it. And while that people nowadays would find that quite constraining and rather dictatorial about how things would work, and perhaps not working organically with the game as it occurred, but it gave it a very good structure, I think, for those players. When we were amateur players, Aggers, in those times, we were Saturday afternoon cricketers, really. Yes. And, a lot of us didn't have pads. You'd arrive and there would be the team kit. Yes. And that's how it was. And it was throwdowns on the outfield. There were no nets to go and practice at and so on. So it gave those players, I think, a lot of confidence and structure about what was going to happen and when and how important. He was also not just critical, Walter. I enjoyed Walter's company. Right. He would come to me even in future tours after he played and while Richard was still playing, and he'd say, "Now you've got an important role tomorrow, Jeremy." And so I'd step in quietly and listen to Walter and what he had to say. And a lot of it made sense, and how he thought that I might be able to, alter the shape of a game a little bit and so on. So I enjoyed listening to him, and I can imagine the Hadleys sitting around at the table, Lilla there making the sandwiches would come out, and all the lads, because most of them played, and they had a net down in there just along one side of the house. And there would be some ferocious games there, I can tell you, with Dale. I mean, Dale was his elder brother, and Dale was probably the most aggressive kind of bowler. He frightened the Indians when he played them in '69. They were literally frightened. And so he was a nasty kind of fast bowler and enjoyed it. Yes. Richard might have been, but he kept it totally under control. And I didn't ever see that come out in him at all. But I did see that effort of changing things every day, and wanting to that continual improvement. And keeping and maintaining your competitive gap and the edge that you had over others by going through this process. And he would deconstruct his skills, like the run-up, like the delivery, how to hold the ball and so on. And he would work his way through those, analysing, thinking, talking about it, finding out about it, watching other people, reading about it. And because of that, he maintained that gap. And he really changed as a bowler and as a player, I think, at Notts. Until then, he was flat out, still a striker with the bat, Eggers. I mean, he was a number 7. I know we tend to think of his bowling, but at number 7, he could come in and he hit generally in quite a wide V, but straight down off the front foot.
From about leg stump too. His left-hander, there's always that little bit of room there.
There was, absolutely. And he didn't like express pace. Well, who does, really? But, I mean, anything below that, like the Tony Pygott argument, the memory we've just had, poor old Tony. I mean, Richard was licking his lips. He said to the day before, I like this Tony Pygott. I've hit him a few times before, Jerry. I said, well, let's do it again, and he loved stats, and he loved, all that. But as a batsman, he was very dangerous hitter. So often he could open a game up and cause a bowler to lose his length and those sorts of things. So,
Let's talk to Mick Newell. He's now the director of cricket, of course, at Nottinghamshire. But for a number of years, Mick would have played alongside Richard. Good day to you. Nice to talk to you again, Mick.
Morning all. Hope you're well.
Well, we're very well. We're a bit disconsolate with the weather, but never mind. But we're cheering ourselves up with memories of Richard Hadley and what sort of influence he must have been on all of you at Trent Bridge in those magical years of the 80s.
Oh, absolutely. We had the combination of Hadley and Rice, and who wouldn't want to play with those two fantastic all-rounders, and certainly raised the game of many of our players who wanted their respect. To play with Richard was a fantastic honour. I made my first-class debut at Lord's. I got 3, and we were 17 for 4.
Critical
Richard
3.
Walked in. Absolutely, we were 17 for 4, and Richard walked in and made 210 not out. So that was a great thing I remember about my debut game.
Yeah, good Lord, that's incredible. What was he like in the dressing room? We've had Jeremy here saying he was quite quiet in the New Zealand dressing room, and writing a book or his diary or whatever it may be. And I mean, he's saying he's not the sort of life and soul of a party type character, I would imagine.
No, very focused on the game. Him and Clive Rice used to sit next to each other in the Trent Bridge dressing rooms, and the paper of choice was the Financial Times a lot of the time for Clive. So Richard sort of got more interested in that because Clive was pouring his way through that. No, not great banter, not great humour. I have memories of wet Saturday mornings when we weren't playing, and they'd sit in the back room watching Norman Wisdom films and cracking themselves up, and all the English blokes are looking at each other thinking, this isn't funny. But to Rice and Hadley, it was hilarious on a couple of wet Saturdays.
Loved cowboy films as well. Loved cowboy war films. All those, yes, yeah.
Sit and watch those.
Very much. John Denver. He was a John Denver man too, high calypso.
I hope Richard's not listening to this. Those pictures, I mean, come on, Mick. I remember driving up the A46, Leicestershire against Nottinghamshire. It was always a good battle. Up we'd go.
but always a sense of trepidation, which was silly because, of course, I knew what we were going to be playing on. A lovely green, lush pitch. Ron Alsop had managed to like a carpet. The end's a little mysteriously barer, so Eddie Hemmings might have a bit of a go later. But predominantly green. I mean, I should have been thinking, wow, I can't wait to bowl on this. But you just knew, almost however well you bowled, you'd be so completely out-bowled by Richard, and he'd probably score a really annoying 50 as well. But those pitches in those days, I mean, he used to rock up and he wouldn't know where it was till the stumps went in.
Yeah, and it was a bit of a three-man team, Hadley, Rice and Ron Alsop. You've described it brilliantly. But then we also, we created, or Notts created, international opening batsmen in Broad and Robinson around that same time, or just after that. So people could play on it. And like you said, Richards could just bowl better than anybody else and bowl fuller. I think the greenness of the pitch maybe tempted opposition bowlers a bit short, whereas Richard would be full and hitting the top of the stumps, or bringing Bruce French behind the stumps, and then a slip cordon that had Rice at first slip, and perhaps Randall was in there and John Birch in the gully, and a lot of catches would go in that area. So yes, there was no doubt that we had sporty pitches. We wanted to win games quickly. In three-day cricket, of course, Aggers at that time. So, we didn't want flat pitches and declaration matches. So we did tend to get a bit of a hurry up.
It's interesting you mentioned Bruce French because, of course, Hadley felled him, didn't he, in a test match?
At Lord's.
Yeah, I mean, teammates in county cricket, but he cleaned him up there, didn't he? Bob Taylor. In fact, you were captain, weren't you? Allowed Bob Taylor to come and keep wicket
out of the sponsors' tent. Yes. Out he came.
The Cornhill tent.
He had to borrow clothes, and he got the little hat with the turned up at the front.
Yes.
And came out and took the afternoon. Then they asked him to play the next day, of course, and he said, I can't last 6 hours. I haven't played for a while. So they got another one. They had Bill Athy actually took the gloves for a start. Then they got Bob.
Yes.
And so French, and then Bill Athy, and then Bob. And then they got a guy from down south, was it... who was playing actually at the Oval at the time, Parks.
Bobby Parks.
So they had 4, and I thought, this is taking it a bit far, it was an interesting match. It was a draw, actually, that game, but you're right, Richard didn't use the short ball.
No.
Very often.
But he used it against a county colleague, Mick, was a bit... He didn't bowl many bouncers, did he?
He didn't, and I tell you, one of the great games that I can remember clearly was when Notts played Somerset here, and Martin Crowe was playing for Somerset, and what a contest that was.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think it might have been 86 or 87, and Martin Crowe got 90, and Hadley stepped it up massively because the pride there for Hadley to get Crowe out, and Crowe wasn't having any of it. And it was I was a short leg most of that time, I think, but that just sticks in my mind as two great New Zealand cricketers battling out in a county match at Trent Bridge.
How was he with other fast bowlers? I mean, because he could bat, was he quite ruthless on the... there were some seriously fast bowlers around the West Indians in those days. I mean, did he get stuck into them, or was he fairly cautious with them?
I think, that game I talked about earlier, Wayne Daniel was playing for Middlesex, and he got that 200. So I think Jeremy's right. I think he would stay leg side of the ball, but incredibly dangerous in that area. Yeah. I just think he liked getting people out. I must admit that, hitting Bruce French, I think, would have shocked him a little bit because he really liked taking wickets and he was so stat-driven, as Jeremy said earlier. That last year for us, 87, he did the double, of course, and he had it in the top of his coffin, the old coffins that we used to carry around.
Oh, yes.
So for me to get the double, I'm going to need to take 60 wickets at Trent Bridge and 40 away. Yeah, 40 away. And for me to get the double, I'm going to need to get 400 runs at Trent Bridge and 600 away. So he knew exactly what sort of pitches we'd be playing. Wow. So we all did, because we could see that on top of his bag. So we all kind of knew what was going to happen. And, of course, he did the double that year in 87, as well as us winning 2 trophies.
Yeah. He did it twice, actually, I think, the double. And there's your planning.
Yeah.
There's the goal setting that he liked to have. Yeah. And stats. I mean, I would have to get the stats man, I'd call the scorer in who might have travelled with us or something like that and say, look, something about this pitch today down here at, in Hampshire. Give me something I can say to Richard. And he would come up with something.
Really?
And I could say to Richard, do you realise, Rich, no bowler's ever got 5 from this end. Really? And boom, and he'd come, and he was one of those players also. For me, it was interesting to watch this because he'd get 5, he'd want 5, and then he'd want 6, and then urge himself on for 7, and he kind of kept on pushing himself, and it's an interesting quality. He almost became a quality. You know, I always thought to myself, can I locate the Hadley in myself?
Yes.
You know, that he became going beyond, even if he had given a great performance, going beyond himself and what he could possibly do.
Yeah.
And I think that's where champions also come from. You know, a lot of champions are kind of happy with being that. A lot of gifted people, you know, the failing with them is that they see other people struggling to find what they do as a pushover. You know, and they don't drive themselves.
Yeah.
Whereas Richard was busy every day doing that.
Was he helpful, Mick? I mean, and you're a batsman, obviously. I mean, and it's obvious, therefore, to think of him whether or not he helped the bowlers. You certainly say he helped me, a member of the opposition, very generously. But I mean, would he help you as well as batsman in the nets?
He wouldn't very often bowl us in the nets, which was lucky for us. Confidence would have been shattered. I do remember one of our young seamers at the time, Kevin Evans, asking him for a few tips, and Richard just said, well, look, I put my 2 hands on top of the seam and I put my thumb underneath, and sometimes I roll my fingers to the left and sometimes I roll my fingers to the right. And Kevin said, well, that's really helpful, Richard. Thank you very much. And
that was it.
Yeah. That was it, because great players can't always associate with normal
you're
players,
right, mate.
can they, you know?
You're right. Not a great... It never helped as a coach.
Would he have been a good captain?
He only captained once in all the 10 or 15 years I played, and that was against some little town like in Curran in Australia, and he came in and gave us a huge team talk.
Did he?
Oh, yeah, he was very fired up for the game.
Did he?
And the boys quite enjoyed the whole sort of experience, really, but yeah, I don't know. He never got the chance.
No.
He might have liked the chance to do that at some point.
Yes.
But we rather felt, look, you just concentrate and do the best you can and everything you've got within you on what you do, because that will help us. And we did the same for him, and he knew that.
Yeah.
He knew that we would field for him. A diving stop in the covers meant that the batsman who'd just come in was going to face Richard. You know, those kinds of things. And the wind change, Richard would have obviously the choice of ends, chose the ball, did everything that was required to allow him to express and put up and punch out and on display what he could do. It was just that beautiful length. And then, as you say, Mick, about that, those fingers going, you couldn't tell much difference. It would just happen. It would just happen. People talk about nowadays bowling in the right areas. Richard didn't bowl in an area. That sounds like a suburb. Richard bowled in a handkerchief.
Yes.
And you could say to Rich, look, Pads, up here, look at where you're bouncing in the pitch. You're going past the edge. This is where you're pitching. And he could see it. We'd stand there. There would be myself and Smith and Paddles, and we'd be saying, look, if you were up here, and you'd point to a little mark, say about a foot further up, I think you'd get an edge. And away you'd go, and you'd think about that down at fine leg for a while. Or there's a gully, terrific gully, good diving, soccer goalkeeper, and back he'd come within 2 overs, there were edges coming. He could just manoeuvre the ball around in such small margins and so accurately.
Yeah. Just a last thought, Mick, before we say goodbye to you. Thanks for for joining us today. I mean, at Trent Bridge itself, I mean, he's just a loved character there, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been very lucky at this ground. We've had some wonderful overseas players, but Sir Richard, you know, Clive Rice, Gary Sobers, we are blessed really at this club with the quality of players. And Richard was the best fast bowler, I'm sure, that we've ever seen at this club in county cricket, and we're very lucky to have had him here for a period of about 8 or 9 years.
Yeah. Last memories. Thank you, Mick. Have a good season.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, thanks to Jonny. There we go, Mick Newell up there at Nottingham. Lovely to hear from him again. Steve Braddock is a Kiwi child of the 80s. When you start having sporting heroes, Sir Richard would have been on most boys' lists. He stood tall amongst all blacks, and his towering achievements inspired many upcoming bowlers, particularly the iconic crouched appeal. It's a great photograph, isn't it? One hand pointing to the sky, the other pointing to the ground. Can you imagine his stats? New Zealand played as many tests as other countries at the time. Utter legend. One of the many reasons why childhood is looked back at with rose-tinted glasses and fondness. Yeah, thank you, Steve. He was that actually right about that appeal.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's none of the sort of running towards the. It was brilliant. What was it like captaining him? Because the temptation must have been just to have thrown the ball and let him just get on with it. But I mean, was it easy or not easy having someone like that in the side? So someone so good, someone so much better than everybody else at what he did.
I think that New Zealand had got accustomed to that by the time I came around as captain. I mean, we knew that Richard was going to be the key man. He had of course Howarth as a captain just before, yes. So there's another pro, played for Surrey, and so they kind of worked together very nicely. When I was captain, and we had our differences at times, I mean, you have to be fair and be honest about things, but I always had Glenn Turner kind of as an intermediary, as the coach at that time. This was the first time we'd ever had a coach. And so that was handy, that the three of us could sit down and we could map out Richard's tour, say, to Australia. Man, was he good in Australia.
Yes.
Both Hadley and also Turner, and working alongside him, helping him to bowl to left hand.
Is that the competitive edge in him again, wanting to be good in Australia?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. 3 tests we played, 33 wickets.
Cool.
In Australia. Hard pitches, hard on your feet, the heat. 11 and a half wickets a match, 5.5 in an innings, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, 11 in a match, 5.5 in an innings. So I mean, we scored more runs and we held the best, more catches, but we had the best bowler.
Yeah.
And that was the reason we won in Australia in '85.
Yeah.
I mean, he was it, and that was Border's team, and they had some good players. They weren't quite as strong, but they were still in Australia, and they still took us to the Gabba, and they still took us to Perth.
Yeah.
You know, and we beat them. And
what I mean, as a captain, and again, because he was so analytical and knew what he wanted to do and so driven and so on, but was it sometimes difficult to get him to do what you wanted to do? Because after all, you see things perhaps differently to him.
Yeah.
And I mean, was that sometimes a bit of a battle, therefore, to take him out of his box and where he was focused into the captains?
It was only really about a couple of things. The first thing I felt at times, but only rarely, I mean, I've got to put that too in that context, was the number of overs. And I would talk with him, and also Glenn would be there as well to work around, you know, what sort of as a number would we think of for a day for Richard, because you wouldn't do that with other bowlers. They would accept that there will be changes, and some days you'll be better than others, and you'll be bowling a little bit more maybe. But Richard was kind of so important to the whole victory there. We would sort of plan things out. Which games would you play? And he was professional enough to work hard enough that you knew he was ready even though he wasn't in the game and playing.
Yes.
But we insisted at certain times that he played, because there is a temptation sometimes to not want to have a bit more time off.
Sure.
And so you had to do that at times. And the overs, is it 20, is it 25? Somewhere in between there, let's just see, so that we could work out, okay, there's these many spells, and so a little bit like Walter would be starting to do.
Yes.
And so it kind of just came around and fitted in with Richard as well, that he could suit that. He had dropped his run up then so that things could be worked out. And I mean, the other thing was sometimes bowlers who get, I mean, I see this a wee bit, I don't know whether it's happening with Anderson and Broad. As you've become more experienced, sometimes there is an element of, could I call it, protection that goes on with your figures.
Yeah.
So that you want the third man in rather than the slip. Because if it goes through, it goes to a boundary or something like that. And you want your mid off because I can pitch up, and then and those kinds of things, certain positions in the field that I would say, no, I'll put my foot down here. And I think we really want it. You want a wicket, don't you? And if it for a tail ender, Rich, I mean, it's got to be a bad ball for him to hit you through mid-off, really.
Yes.
It's got to be too full. So there were those kinds of discussions that we would have. And then there were the discussions that, because Richard was so good at the game, that other things around the game, like he mentioned his speaking there in his interview and so on, or those types of things that would inevitably lead to missing practices.
Right, yes.
And that kind of thing. Or we would be running around the field as a team the day before the game, and he was up in just as we would pass, the Basin Reserve, up in the long room up there, he'd be giving a talk.
Yes.
Those sorts of little things that would happen. But I knew deep beneath it all, Richard was professional enough, and he had so much pride in what he did. It wasn't really going to be mattering too much. But I was more concerned about what the others in the team felt about that.
Absolutely, yes.
And so, just the same as sometimes your better players will want to wear something strange, and we've decided already we're going to warm up in this kind of kit, fellas, and they'll come out with a cravat on or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
So those kinds of things, they're always little tests, but they're not really that important.
No. I wonder how do you think he would have been if he hadn't been so standout, amazing in your side? If there'd been someone else not someone else.
Well, like a Clive Rice.
Well, yes, indeed. I mean, he
did okay there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
And he became so close, obviously, to his mate Clive Rice.
Yes. They were a formidable combination.
Yeah, well, you would know more about that than I played him after he finished.
Yes.
But he must have been in those days. He looked to be a very determined.
Well, Clive was everything sort of character that Richard might not have been. Richard was very quiet, and I mean, Clive was quite quiet, but he was a very aggressive. Very aggressive South African in your face. And
I prefer Richard's way. To be really honest with you, I like a man who turns his back. When you beat someone, I want to see I like a bowler when I see his back. I think, we're into this today. Rather than someone who's yapping away at you.
Roger McCann. When the 1990 New Zealanders came to Belfast, my father asked to take me as an 11-year-old out of school to go and watch. My teacher, Mr. Carroll, said, yes, you've got to go.
Good on you, Mr. Carroll.
See the great Hadley. I can still picture him gliding in 1990. Yeah, so he's,
that's his last tour.
Yeah, towards the end, that wasn't it? I was intrigued looking back. Your famous win, the first test in '83. You were captain, wasn't it? I mean, that was a massive.
Headingley?
Yes.
Jeffrey was captain.
Oh, Jeffrey's captain.
Yes.
Okay. Hadley's figures.
No wickets.
0.
Well.
That just seems incredible. Can you imagine New Zealand's? Oh well, obviously Hadley got 10 wickets and
that was extraordinary, wasn't it? It wasn't that he didn't bowl well. He beat the bat, and there was a catch dropped in the slips as well, I remember. But you're right, no wickets in the first test. He did get runs. I think he got a 75 or something like that. And
he got a stack more in the series.
Oh yes, he did.
Yeah, but he did. That first, it's rather like.
But he didn't get runs, and I got 4. I got 4, and I took pleasure. I would have to say, just now as I look back at the time, we on the last day, it was a beautiful day over Headingley, and. All the New Zealanders came to celebrate with us what they could see was a potential victory, the first victory in England since 1930. So they arrived, all 733 of them, and up they came. As soon as we'd won, up they came, and we had those. You came in those days, where the big stand is, not the main stand where you commentate from, Aggers, but to the left.
Yes.
There was an administration block, brick,
the old pavilion,
and where the nets were as well. And you went upstairs. Clearly it would have been a kitchen, because there were all sorts of things that had been changed out from pipes and so on and sticking out in the wall, and it had been turned into our dressing room. So we were upstairs, and all these 733 people walked up the stairs and joined us.
Wow.
All Kiwis in the room, and we had a wonderful time. I got the guitar out. I still had my pads on because I'd finished Not Out, and having a few drinks there as well, and fud pucker or whatever it was called, orange juice from tea, and a bit of this and a bit of that thrown into it. I'd spilled it over my trousers, and I went over to Hadley, and there were sort of 3 generations of Hadleys standing in the corner, and all of them in tears. Really? His dad, Walter, alive. Well, it was the emotion of the moment for him, that we had won this first game, and the big deal for him. And Richard, because he hadn't got a wicket in the match, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little tear in the eye.
Yeah.
And then his son. Also, he was holding his son. Well, Richard had mistaken a tube of deep heat for something round, and his underwear, and so he was in tears for different reasons. But I mean, and I said, thank heavens you can bat, Hadley. I took pleasure.
It's a great example of what a leveller cricket is. Though.
Oh yeah.
In that there is, I mean, a massive moment like that. It's like these great batsmen who haven't got onto the honours board at Lords. There's always some way. Don Bradburn averaging 99. I mean, there's some way in which the game just gets you. And in that on that famous day, the greatest New Zealand cricketer.
Yes.
Well, okay, contributed with the bat, but not as you might expect. It is remarkable. Jeremy Wimbush. I had the great pleasure of watching Richard Hadley take his 400th Test wicket at the old rugby ground.
Oh, and the Roses came out.
In Christchurch in February 1990. There was an unexpected bonus. I had no idea that a Test match was due to start that day. I just arrived in Christchurch with a colleague to attend a wool textile research conference the previous evening. That sounds like a good night out, Jeremy. We'd been in transit from the UK for nearly 50 hours. We flew non-stop via Los Angeles. We were completely jet-lagged. However, after a very good night's sleep and having a free day to recover, we realised a Test match against India was due to start at 10:30 that morning. As we're both Yorkshire members and keen cricket followers, this was too good an opportunity to miss. So after a hearty breakfast, we called a taxi to the ground just in time for the start, and we found ourselves sat behind two expats from Lancashire. Well, there you go. A very enjoyable and relaxing day watching New Zealand bowling against India followed, capped by Sir Richard's 400th Test wicket quite late in the day.